When Lewis and Clark journeyed up the Missouri River, over the Rocky Mountains, and down the Columbia River to the Pacific Ocean, they mapped an area of the continent that up until this point had been unknown. A number of different groups sent out fur trappers and trading expeditions following in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark, and they established settlements and trading posts along the way, including on the Pacific coast. Eventually, ordinary settlers would travel along the Oregon Trail, a 2,000-mile route from Missouri to that same Pacific Coast region. Starting in the 1830s and reaching its peak between 1843 and 1846, more than 400,000 settlers followed the path primarily to the Willamette Valley in Oregon. The settlers came from every walk of life, ranchers, farmers, miners, businessmen, and they brought their families on the journey with them. Over the course of 30 years, many different groups broke away from the Oregon Trail at different points to establish their own settlements in California, Montana, and Utah. While the end of the trip may have been in rich, fertile farmland, the land at the beginning of the trip was as ominous and foreboding as any land in the country. In 1806, Zebulon Pike had said that the land was unfit for human habitation and called it the Great American Desert. There were very few trees and almost no surface water to aid settlers and animals at the start of their journey. Given that travelers covered up to 15 miles a day, it was a challenge for all those on the journey to get enough water to stay healthy right from the beginning. While there were a number of starting points for the Oregon Trail, the most common one was Independence, Missouri. Wherever the starting point, all of the routes converged near Fort Kearny, Nebraska, along the lower Platte River Valley. Choosing the right time to leave may also have been one of the most important requirements of the trip. If settlers left too early, they risked not having enough grass for their livestock and animals to graze on. If they left too late, they risked getting stuck in the Rocky Mountains as winter was setting in. Once they reached the Rockies, finding paths through to the other side required a good map and some luck. If settlers were fortunate enough to get past all of those challenges, the difficult Columbia River awaited. Wagons had to be taken apart and floated downriver with most of the things that the settlers had brought with them on board, and any of those things could have been lost at any point. Success meant arriving in Oregon City, Oregon, or anywhere else in the Willamette Valley alive. The trail was even too difficult for the Conestoga Wagon, long used as the means for transporting families and their possessions around the East Coast and down the Santa Fe Trail. Instead, the smaller Prairie Schooner, which was about half the size of the Conestoga, and made the trip. New ones cost from anywhere from $85 to $170. Some of the early wagon manufacturers, such as Studebaker, would go on to manufacture automobiles at the beginning of the 20th century. Beyond buying a wagon, which some settlers, especially farmers, did not have to do because they already owned one, costs ranged from $0 to $150 to $200 if they needed to buy whatever they needed for the trip. Disease was the main killer of settlers during the trip, with cholera being the most common cause of death, claiming 3% of all travelers from 1849 to 1855. Other causes of death included hypothermia, drowning in river crossings, getting run over by wagons, and accidental gun deaths. The actual number of deaths of those who traveled along the Oregon Trail is not surprisingly unknown, but even those that survived the length of the trip were not completely healthy when they got there. Those that did die during the journey were often buried in the middle of the trail so that their graves would be trampled by animals, making them difficult to find. When the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1868, the Oregon Trail essentially became useless. In its time, it helped the United States spread its influence and beliefs from sea to shining sea. It is doubtful that the United States would have become the transcontinental power they did without the thousands that traveled west each year.